Hello and welcome to the FMCC World FM Day Virtual Conference. Today's session is outsourcing or co-sourcing to get the best plus more. And our presenter is Mike Liddle. Next slide. I want to let everyone know that they are muted for audio quality. Next slide. If you do have any questions during this presentation, feel free and type them into the question box on your control panel, and we'll go over them during the Q&A portion of the webinar at the end. Next slide, please. And next slide. Okay. The FMCC provides many services to the FM community, such as Ask the Expert, Find a Consultant, Locate a Speaker, and online educational resources. You may find more information at their website, fmcc.ifma.org. Next slide, please. And as always, we do want to take the time to thank our sponsors. Next slide, please. And the reason we are all here today to hear this great content is it's World FM Day. We just want to always like to celebrate the great work of the FM profession and the impact it has on all of our lives. Next slide, please. And as you probably well know, there's 31 hours of World FM Day celebration going on between yesterday U.S. time and through midnight tonight. So great sessions. Next slide. And these are all the places in the world that presentations are being done so that we truly get that global world perspective for World FM Day. Next slide. And these are the beautiful and handsome people that have made it possible. These are all the speakers and moderators that really have put in a lot of work and effort to put these great presentations together, which Mike, of course, is one. Next. And that's me. Okay, next slide. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or wherever you guys are. As the slide says, my name is Mike Liddle. I run Business and Facilities, which is an independent real estate and facility management operation. We're based in the UK but operate all over EMEA. We've specialized in large-scale outsourced programs for quite a few companies. One of the things I will do at the end is run through case studies, one Microsoft, one short one Oracle, and then a very different one for Merck, Sharp and Dome and Shearing Plough. Learning objectives, I'm sure you'll understand all of those. Okay, what I want to talk about is outsourcing. Now, I actually prefer to say co-sourcing because too many times organizations think that they're passing the responsibility from, say, in-house to an external provider. But in fact, it's not like that at all. It's like a manage, it's a cooperation, and if you don't treat it like that, you'll end up getting divorced fairly quickly. We'll talk about creating a team. I talk about researching the business needs. This is a very important issue. It's needs, not wants. I'll look at some of the risks, consider some outputs, look at cultural issues, which, to be quite honest, the further east and south you go, you'll hear that expression several times, but the further east and south you go, it gets harder. The cultural issues change. Language, no, it's not just language, it's the way things are done. We need to set budgets and set timescales. These have got to be realistic. You can't outsource a big operation in a month flat. It takes a long time, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of work. So, why co-source and not outsource? I view this whole process as very much a marriage of two organizations. You've got to get to know each other, get to know your strengths, your weaknesses, anything you need to change, and it's very, very important. But before we do that, the single most important element is to make sure you work with an educated client. If you do not have an educated client, might I suggest that's going to be your very first activity. Next stage would be to select regions. If I can use Europe, which is an easy one for me being based over here, it's very easy to split regions quite easily. For instance, the Nordic regions, that's a very logical grouping of countries. You can take Central and Eastern Europe as one. You can then look at EMEA, and then you can go over to APAC and Australasia. It's very important to decide what you want to do. This will very much be based on where your business is located, but it needs to be sensible. And I would suggest that you also need to match the capabilities as well of people that may wish to help you. Researching potential providers, very, very important activity. I would never go more than 10 to start with, but you need to look very carefully at what they do. Now, in order to deliver this exercise, you need to set up a base team. Now, initially, this base team needs to be you need to have a client representative who's willing to work on an almost day-to-day basis with you. Most cases it's consultancy-led, some cases it's not, but the ones that we've worked on, we're the consultants leading the team, but we work very, very closely with the client. Agreeing purchasing rules, it's an interesting one. A public sector, they tend to have their own way of doing things. Certainly working in the UK, the public sector purchasing is quite well established now. It tends to have more steps than I would like to have in it, but that's the way they want to operate, so you've just got to live with it. But purchasing is very important to get them on your side, because they can actually help you with lots of the information. And then once you've done that, we can agree a strategy moving forward, timetable, strategy, who's doing what, who's checking what. Because very often your client, he's got his day job to do, so it needs to be, the strategy needs to take that into account. Now, the next stage is to find out what the business wants. This whole activity needs to be business driven. It's not what some finance guy or operational director thinks is a great idea. The business has got to decide what it wants, why it wants it, and be very clear about the delivery and the expectations. My experience, if you can get the CEO to sponsor the program, then that makes life very, very easy, because further down the line, when you're dealing with other parts of the business which aren't necessarily as close to, say, head office, if there's a problem, you just refer these people to the CEO. 9 times out of 10 or 19 times out of 20, nothing is done about it. The person just goes away. Occasionally there are issues that he needs to resolve, but that's his job, not yours. I talk about establishing corporate standards. In our experience, the best projects are the ones where the company has developed its own corporate standards. As examples, a carpet, you will use, say, a Milliken or an interface carpet tile. It'll be this model. It's not this model or similar, it's that model. Similarly with furniture, we'll use, say, steel case furniture. We'll establish a range, and that's what you will use. The desks will be this size, the filing space will be that size. So it's very, very simple to then take that corporate standard and establish it. Similarly, with office spaces, usually with these programs, there's an element of once it's been built and organised, the standards, who gets an office, who doesn't get an office, how much space people have. If you have all those standards written down, it's very, very easy to move forward. Similarly, with service levels, if you've already got service levels set within, say, the head office or the home country, it's very simple to apply those. Now you may not get the same result, but at least it's a service level, it's a standard to start from or to work up to. Team work is extremely important in the whole process. And this is the team, both the client side, if it's consultant-led, and then ultimately FM provider. FM providers are good guys. It's good to work with them. But I always like to start with a pilot project. Again, the biggest ones that we've done, we did a pilot which could be, it could be a country, it could be a group of countries. Sorry, I've just been interrupted by various people trying to get into my office here. Keep telling them to go away. The pilot that we used for Microsoft was actually the Netherlands and Holland and Italy, and it was very interesting because they're two quite different cultures, but that set the standard for all the other work that was being done. Creating a management process, again, you've got to fit in to the culture of the company, and that in itself is a very important issue. Agreeing business communication. Now that's right down at grassroots level. It's working with the local business units, the people that are going to be going to receive all these the changes. You need to get that communications right. It's very important that they know exactly what's going on. Otherwise, they'll get a nasty surprise at the end, and at the end of that day, you'll get the blame for it. Again, with companies, larger organisations, they usually have some form of CAFM or management tools available, so it's then simple to transfer those over. Most of them can go global if they're the major company ones, and most organisations are familiar with, if not all of them. I talk with we need to treat providers as potential partners. These guys, certainly in this country, have been used to providing facility management services over, say, at least 20 years. So there's a lot of experience being gathered. Some of it harsh, some of it not so harsh. But over the last few years, the FM providers have learned to go with the client and actually to come up with alternatives and provide much better service. Now, tender documentation templates in the public sector in the UK and most places, the documentation template tends to be a bit heavy, but the best work is actually to get it as concise as possible. The information needs to be totally accurate. It needs to be very, very clear, and giving give the whole story. If you've got a problem in an area, tell them you've got a problem with it. Don't hide it, because if you hide something or omit it, they'll come back to you looking for more money. Some clients don't like. They want to just see the money side of the process, but very often I would recommend to encourage alternative options, because these FM providers, they can have, for instance, two clients in the same area as you, and they've maybe got a specialist in an area that you could do with a little bit of help from. Allow them to give you the alternatives. Obviously make sure they're compliant with your tender specifications, but encourage alternatives. We've discovered that there's many ways to solve problems, and these guys have been doing it for a few years. Let them do it. Now, selection of your FM providers. I would never go to a list longer than 10, maximum 10 individuals to have a look at. In the marketplace, there's not 20 providers in the world that can provide these services anyway, so the job is actually relatively easy. But you must check very, very, very carefully. As an example, a few years ago, we had an organisation who they only had 2 clients in that particular country, and they assured us that there was a large team ready to back them, and that you know, everything would be sweetness and light. Well, when we actually talked to the clients to check that, the clients said, "Oh yes, I remember when they were bidding for such and such a contract, the team suddenly got a lot smaller, and we didn't get much service." So yes, they were there, but they were just following clients. They didn't have an in-country backup service. So it's very important to get these references carefully checked. Governance and legal, again, I mean, even in this, you'll tell from my accent that I'm Scottish, but the difference between Scottish law and English law is different. It's not hugely different, but it is different. Governance and legal needs to be looked at very carefully, and most organisations can work this through, but it does vary, and if you're not careful, it will catch you. Managing expectations, and this is it's a hard one to do, because in some cases you have an organisation who doesn't have the service levels that we have, say, in the UK or in the States, and for instance in Africa there's many services that they don't have, and that they would love to have them, but if they have to pay for them, then they're not very happy. So you need to manage the expectations. That's a hard one to do. Sorry, one thing, I was looking at my notes here. On the tender documentation, I would be very strong in making sure that you understand how the organisation is pricing the documentation. I like to see what the profit margin is for an organisation. I want to see what its overhead recovery is. I want to see in a whole country outsource, I want to see that they've got an allowance of, say, $100,000 for software, whether it be CAFM or whatever. I want to see that. I want to see an implementation plan and its cost. And a lot of companies have resisted in the past giving us the profit and overhead recovery information, but in fact it's not difficult to get it. They've got it, and it's obviously confidential, but it gives you a clue as to how organizations operate. And based on experience, at the end of the day, the actual difference in money usually is actually very, very small. The big differentiator is the way that the provider is going to carry out the work and the people that he's going to put forward. It's the old adage, if you like them, do you trust them, do you think you could work with them? It's very important that that relationship is sorted out. Now, I'll move on to case studies. Microsoft was an interesting organisation to deal with. They had lots of corporate standards. They tended to vary a little bit country to country, but what we did was we did a pilot in the Netherlands and then in Italy. Culturally, the two countries they're not very different. They're slightly different. Netherlands are very, very organised, very earnest people, very organised as well. Nevertheless, they didn't always stick with the corporate standards, which was an issue. So what we did again was we produced one set of documentation which can be used in both countries. Most countries will tend to insist that the language of the documentation is English. Now it's very harsh for non-English speaking peoples, but most of the organisations that we've dealt with are US based, and obviously English is required, and it makes life a lot easier for us. But generally speaking, the big boys can cope with the language, and in many cases I know at least 2 organisations who all the tender documentation is actually produced and dealt with over here anyway, so it makes life easy. So what we did with Microsoft was we took the corporate standards, we applied them to the documentation. We went to the marketplace. In the Netherlands, it was relatively easy to do. Their head office was very close to Schiphol Airport. So lots of other FM providers in the area, so it was relatively easy to get an interesting grouping together, and we went from a selection of 5 immediately to 1. It was quite straightforward. In Italy, it wasn't quite as straightforward. Two offices, one in Milan, one in Rome, culturally both different cities, but again the corporate standards they varied quite a bit. We were able, because they're the 2 major centres in Italy, we were able quite easily to get from 5 to 1. And the outsource programme was then established and put in place. We spent quite a bit. We spent more time on those 2 processes, getting them right and together, so that when we moved forward, we already had the documentation created, so it was a case of just taking the in-country information and putting it into the documentation. Also, the client, who was UK based, was totally up to speed with what was going, so when we went forward to the next country, or we did it country by country because it was deemed to be too difficult to try and do it EMEA-wide initially. In fact, after quite a few countries, they took it on board and did it with their own teams, which was fine. Very successful, and it's now in its next generation, which is good. Oracle. Oracle, very disciplined organisation in terms of corporate standards. They've got very rigid standards of offices, carpets, furniture. You can go into offices all over the place and you'll recognise it. It does vary, again, the further east or south you go, but that's limited by as much availability. In some cases, the furniture is just not available. For instance, in Nigeria, it's very difficult to get furniture into the country because there's a huge tax, but something similar is available, so you've got that standard. Again, with Oracle, they had a lot of very, very good information. Their real estate, they're very much more real estate driven than facility management driven, which was an interesting exercise. So they tended to have all of the detail, they had all of the drawings of all the buildings, they knew exactly which organisation was where, and what they were doing. And what we did in Germany, we had to check physically all of the buildings because we weren't absolutely sure that it was correct. But at the end of the day, it was correct, and we were able, again, because the German market is very mature, we were able to go. Actually, we went straight to 5. We didn't bother with a long list because, to be quite honest, once you've done this exercise a few times, you should know who the players are, who's capable, who's not capable. You've got to make sure though you get there are a few people coming from other countries now who are as capable. You've got to make sure you include those as well. We took the exercise, we got it played in 3 months. It was then we went from it's a much more inclusive contract rather than the previous one. So they provided more services, but it was done inside 3 months, and we then used that to copy certainly to the UK, and the process is moving forward. Merck Sharp and Dome merged with Shearing Plough, and they are actually the second largest pharmaceutical company in the world, but not many people know that. I don't know why. They spent a year thinking about what they were going to do from a business point of view. They sat down and they said, okay, what do we want to do in what markets? What do we need there? How do we need to change the organisation? And they spent a year doing that, and then they said, okay guys, this is what we want to achieve. How can we do it? Now it was an exercise of helping them sort out the existing buildings. It was construct it, manage it, fit it out, but the most important element was to then be able to hand over that building fully organised over to one of two facility managed FM providers throughout EMEA. The office element was provided by Sodexo, and the production manufacturing was to be dealt with by JCI. So we dealt with the office side, which was fine, and we had to work all through the process to make sure that Sodexo knew exactly what was going on. Anything that they required was being implemented as we went through the design and fit out, and then at the end of the process it was a clean straight into full service for the new MSD organisation. Again, with other jobs, we started with a pilot. But before we did that, because we've done this before, we actually took the corporate standards and we rewrote them slightly because we know that there's certain things in certain countries you just can't get away with. So we rewrote this and agreed it with the client. The client was based in the UK, but the actual project was financed out of the States. So it was a big change for both organisations and a big spend as well. But once we had that, those corporate standards, we implemented we did two fairly large organisations, 500 people in Munich, 500 people in Madrid in Spain. The Munich one was an existing building that we were able to completely change around, shut down an adjacent building and move an international group out altogether. So that was the start of it. We then had to rewrite the facility management requirements, and so that, say, 5 months before we got to completion, Sodexo were fully involved. They knew exactly what was coming. They had the key employee or employees were already on site. So they started on day one with full service. And I've got to say that worked extremely well. I think if you've got buildings with, say, 500 plus, you need to have the FM provider in place probably 5 or 6 months before. Not the whole team, but the key members of the team, just to make sure that they're fully familiar with the spaces, how they're operated, and if there are any changes in requirement. Very interesting exercise. It started off in Estonia, up in the north, Munich, Cairo, Amman, Dubai, Beirut, a fabulous place to work, Beirut. It's a bit dangerous at the moment, but nevertheless. Saudi Arabia was a very interesting country to work in. Very complex religious laws and male-female issues as well. As an example, toilets, it's unacceptable for a man or other members of staff to be able to see a lady going into the ladies' toilets. So you've got to provide additional corridors to make sure this is avoided. Things like prayer times. They have lots of, I think it's 4 prayer sessions a day. We've got to provide a prayer room, but this can be a multi-faith prayer room as well. These are just one of the many cultural issues that you'll come up against, and a few of them surprised me. But again, further east, you've got to be careful. It's not just not language; it's just the way things are done. Same as you go into the southern continents as well. It's not a minefield. You just got to be very careful. As my mother once said to me, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Please speak and listen on the basis of twice and a half. So, if I can move on to warnings, these are just items, just as an aide-memoire. Make sure that the CEO is driving the process, not on a daily basis. The CEOs are they're too busy, but also if they get their mind into detail, they can cause havoc. But if he's in charge, you'll do well. Remember that outsourced programs may not necessarily save you money. Again, local people in, say, Oman or Saudi Arabia or Africa won't necessarily get the same levels of service that you would get in London or Amsterdam or New York. So that is important. Culture, I've talked about already. It's a very important issue. Going back to the outsourcing money issue, it must be clearly understood by the CEO and management team that if you all of a sudden put in service levels that aren't there before, that cost more than the company's being paid before, you've got to make sure that they don't suddenly remove bonuses from people because their performance level's not as good. That's why it's so important that the team at the beginning, driven by the CEO, need to understand those issues and compensate where necessary. Culture, again, you need to be very careful. And when you first start in these countries, I always sit in my hands and listen all the time, and then move forward, and you learn a lot that way. Your conflicts with compliance and governance, the way that we do things in States, Europe, slightly different to other countries. You will definitely get conflicts, but it's possible to deal with these and still stick within the rules that we're used to. Double check provider capability and references. I mentioned earlier the company who said they had the capability in country, and in fact they didn't. And your omission is their additional profit. I can't stress enough the need to provide them and check all the information, so you give it to them in as detailed form as possible, and don't make assumptions, because if you make assumptions, they'll take advantage. Further east and south, I think I've said this 6 times so far, you need to be very careful. Local management may act against you as well. I've actually seen that in one. It wasn't a Middle Eastern company either. The local management team decided that they wanted to hijack the budget for an outsourced project, and in fact they nearly got away with it. But that's why having the CEO on your side is a good one. Don't believe all you're told. I know I'm very sorry, I'm a cynical gentleman, but I don't believe anything I'm told at all until such time I've proven it and seen it myself. And once we've got a co-source or outsource fully organised, make sure you follow it up. I'm not talking about following it up in 2 or 3 weeks. It needs to be followed up in at least the first 3 months, then 6, then 9, then 12, because there's always something that's different that's going to come along and need change. And it's usually better if the team that are doing the whole exercise understand what the process and why it's there, and they're in a better position then to help change it and make it forward. There has been a practice of certainly in mainland Europe and UK of going for 3-year, 0 to 3 year contracts, but in fact I've seen an increased number in the 0 to 3 plus 2 plus 2. which means that as long as you're happy with the FM provider, and there's a mechanism for changes in cost. Now, changes in cost doesn't mean up; it can come down as well. If you start using slightly different machinery, you can use less staff. It's very important that that team evaluate that process. So at this stage, I'd be happy to take any questions or make any further comment if you wish. Josh, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, got you now.
Okay, for some reason my headset wasn't coming through. Sorry. It says, do you see Britain exiting the Eurozone to have any effect on the outsourcing models across Europe?
Absolutely not. Britain and Europe are inextricably linked, as they are to America and to other marketplaces. There's been a lot of fear-mongering going on, but in reality, business has gone on. We've now got a new Prime Minister. The pound against the dollar is back up again. The euro is coming back up again. It'll not get to probably the same level that it was because it was a bit overheated, but we will continue to do business. We need migrant workers in this country in the same way that Germany needs its migrant workers. It's been traditional for years. So there'll be a little hiccup. I'm sure the European Union always manages to try to get its own way, but I think that both parties have realised that, oops, this is a wake-up call. I personally think it's a really bad move to move out of Europe, but the country voted it, so they voted it. So I don't believe it's going to cause any difference whatsoever. I still have euro trading accounts, sterling accounts. Nothing's going to change there.
Great. It says, can you please explain? Oh, hold on, just a moment. Can you please explain what trends you are seeing outsourcing across Europe? Ergo, FM integrated with shared services or single service contracts. Is the co-sourcing of FM services following IT outsourcing trends?
I don't think FM's following IT. I mean, it's going parallel. There's much more emphasis to get more services into the more services into the bundle than in the past. I mean, so I think that the more services that the FM providers can come up with, then the more the clients will be happy. And as they mature through the 1, 2, 3 to 5 year contracts, you can, at the end of year 4, you're not going to take much money out of an FM contract because you've done it all, but you can provide more services, and that's the way it's going to go.
Very good. We just have a few comments saying, I agree, and Mike, you know what I mean, so don't trust what clients in CEE promise you. Okay. At that time, that's the end of the questions that I have. I don't see any more coming in. If you do have any other questions, Mike's email is up on the screen right now. And again, if you do want a copy of a PDF of this PowerPoint, you can go ahead and download it on your control panel. Just under the handout section, just click on handouts and then download the PDF. Mike, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm delighted to share my humble opinions with you guys, and happy to talk to anybody offline or on the phone about some of the stuff that we've done.
Great, I want to thank you very much. Oh, sorry. And thank you very much, everyone. Have a great World FM Day, and hopefully I shall see some of you on the other presentations throughout the day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.